Welcome everybody. This week's Griscom stream, David here as always. Hope you're doing well wherever you are at. To be honest, man, I don't know what's going on. I have not slept at all in like 5 days. So I don't know how long this one's going to be today, but I always want to make sure that I'm hopping on and chatting with y'all because I really appreciate hearing from everybody. We got some interesting stuff to talk about. Unfortunately, not too hopeful, but times like these, I don't know. It's not worth it to sugarcoat things. Just a couple things up top. We got this week. We're going to be joined by Matt Chrisman of Trap House, and also the phenomenal. If you haven't checked it out, the phenomenal podcast Hell of Presidents. We're going to be talking to him a little bit about the post Bernie moment, Sleepy Joe. And talking about why being well-versed in history is really, really crucial for any kind of serious left-wing movement. Really excited to get Chrisman on the podcast. It was always fun having him on TMBS. Maybe I can see if we can get him on some grill pill stuff too. I'm sorry that the merch stuff's taking a little bit longer. Hopefully it'll be launching next week. Couple snags, had to set up tax stuff, and Lord, I'll tell you what, going through all those hurdles almost made me a libertarian, but I've come out on the other side unscathed. We got some fun stuff coming up, bonus content for patrons soon too. Actually, I might crowdsource this one a little bit. I have an idea of what I was going to do, but there's going to be a couple of things that we're going to be launching in August. We're going to be don't worry, nothing has been cut. But we're going to be adding some new stuff in the near future. And also, we're going to be doing cross streams with our friends at This Is Revolution at least twice a month. We're going to do new shows with them. We'll be, each of us bring in a couple articles and we'll chat for about an hour or so. So look forward to that starting in August. I think there'll be Thursday nights, like bi-weekly. I think the 11th might be the first one, but I'll get you all the dates once we get everything sorted there. But really excited to be doing more with our friends over there at This Is Revolution. And Lord, is there anything else? Yeah, there's some really big stuff that I really would like to announce, but I think it'd be better to wait till we get everything figured out. But keep your eye out for some new stuff coming out from Matt and I, adjacent, but not necessarily included in Left Reckoning. Really looking forward to getting all of that out there. And then one last thing before we jump into stories and start taking questions and stuff. We've gotten a lot of new patrons lately, which I really, really am thankful for, and welcome, to the community here. These streams are a little bit more casual. So unlike the main show, we answer questions from the chat. So feel free to jump in with anything that you got, on the top of your mind. I'm always happy to interact with y'all as much as possible. And one sort of big thing. This will be the last Griscom stream on Tuesday. We'll be moving that to another day in the week. I'll have to figure that out because we're going to be moving the main show of Left Reckoning to Tuesday nights at 7 Central. We had initially sort of felt that we wanted to leave Tuesdays, empty just because that was when we recorded TMBS. And for Matt and I, it sort of felt right to sort of move on to another day. But we've been talking a lot about it, and we think that we want to return to that Tuesday night spot because it really worked well for us for a lot of reasons. And I think that, jumping back into that spot, I think for Matt and I is going to feel really nice. So this week we have a show tomorrow, Wednesday, 7 Central with Matt Chrisman, but that will be our last show on Wednesday nights. We'll be moving the main show to Tuesdays at 7 Central. So a couple programming things to be jumping, keep marking on your calendar. But the last thing is just like we're going to talk up top, and then I'll start taking questions. But we're going to talk up front about this really, really startling revelation about child labor in Alabama. But I did just want to say, so this week for our bonus episode, it's something that I think we're going to be doing a little bit more frequently. I don't know if people are familiar with the video work I was doing for Jacobin, where basically me and Cale Brooks were coming together and putting out these video essays, on everything from why the left needs theory to why socialists aren't a threat to your private property, but capital is. I think we're going to start launching something similar on Left Reckoning. I'll be sort of tackling a topic in like 10 15 minutes, and we'll be releasing those for patrons at first. So this Sunday will be the first one. I have a topic in mind, but if anyone has any suggestions for topics or anything you might want to see me tackle, feel free to throw that in the chat too, and we can explore whether or not that would work out. But yeah, so a lot of fun stuff to get to at the top, but let's not belabor everything too much. I'll be taking questions in just a second. But first, I wanted to start by talking about this story that has been reported by Reuters. Luckily, a lot of people in left media have been covering it. But I've been surprised that this hasn't become a major national news story yet. And that is the story that Hyundai has been employing child laborers at one of their contractor facilities in Alabama. And the more you read about this story, I highly suggest people check it out. It's you can find it on Reuters. The title is Hyundai subsidiary has used child labor at Alabama factory by Joshua Schneier, Mika Rosenberg, and Christina Cook. Highly suggest people check that story out because that's like public service journalism at its best. It's a horrible story, but it's one of those things, as we'll get to in a second, that had been known at least by the government for a good while now, and they were not acting on it. So I'm very thankful for those journalists at Reuters for digging this up and putting this out there to the public. I think it's a bit shameful, frankly, that this is still mainly being covered by left independent media and isn't really becoming a major national news story, because this is a scandal through and through, and it touches at a lot of different things, that are very endemic into our current modern capitalist hellscape. But just to fill people in, if you haven't seen this at all, in Alabama, according to area police, there was a family that had 3 underage workers who were working at this facility making parts for Hyundai. 8 former and current employees of the factory have also corroborated this story as well. So the point is that people knew. It wasn't like, oh, somebody lied on their application or something like that. And I'm sorry, friends. One of the people who was employed there was probably as young as 12. Somebody fucking knew higher up, and they were trying to sweep this under the rug. Now, this company, the subsidiary of Hyundai, has already been fined by OSHA for egregious workers violations, workplace violations, including a high risk for amputations. Now, I want that to sink in for a second when we talk about the severity of this. Skirting child labor laws in the first place is absolutely disgusting. Children should be being kids, being in school, and we as a society should be providing for people so that families don't get themselves into a situation where they're trying to look to their kids, to help make ends meet at the end of the month. So it's egregious enough just on the fact that it's child labor. But when you read about the state of this facility and how dangerous it is for adults, even, it's scandalous. This is quoting from the Reuters piece. The smart plant builds parts for the popular Elantra, Sonata, and Santa Fe models, vehicles that through June accounted for almost 37% of Hyundai's U.S. sales, according to the car maker. The factory has received repeated OSHA penalties for health and safety violations, federal records show. And I just want to note for people who might not be familiar with how OSHA operates, OSHA is an arm of the U.S. government that basically looks after workplace safety violations, right? Making sure that companies are, not skirting labor law, aren't putting their employees in undue danger to produce the products that they produce. But remember that OSHA is incredibly lax. Like many things in our federal government, it is not the first one to start sprinting to look out for working people. So the fact that OSHA has come down heavy-handed against these people in the past, and you're going to be surprised at how lax it even sounds then, the actual numbers of fines that they've gotten for some of the other violations that they've been proven guilty on. Just remember that this is exceptional in its own case, because OSHA very rarely is an organization that's going to be getting involved in this kind of way. But quoting again from the piece, a Reuters review of the records shows Smart has been assessed with at least $48,515 in OSHA penalties since 2013 and was most recently fined this year. OSHA inspections at Smart have documented violations, including crush and amputation hazards at the factory. Now, I want to just say the focus of this story is about the egregious use of child labor at this facility. But also remember what we're talking about here, that there is a significant risk for adult workers to be crushed or to face amputation because of the dangerous conditions at this facility, right? And even with that being proven, they're only getting fined something like $50,000. Frankly, a slap on the wrist. And it's a real shame, the state of our labor enforcement in this country, that something like that can be brought to light and the penalties are so lax. It's absolutely shameful. We haven't seen very much so far in terms of punishment for this organization. I'm sorry, people should be in jail. Facility managers should be in jail. The company executives should be in jail. They should face steep penalties. And it just shows how weak and lax the already existing laws on the books are when you're getting, exposed for putting your workers in extremely dangerous conditions and you're getting a slap on the wrist, $50,000 fine. Now, Hyundai, Korean company, said to Reuters that they do not tolerate illegal employment practices at any Hyundai entity. Quote, "We have policies and procedures in place that require compliance with all local, state, and federal laws." It didn't answer detailed questions from Reuters about the findings. And we'll get back to Hyundai in a second, and the fact that, this being a subsidiary and not like a direct factory, excuse me, is one of the kind of weaselly ways that companies like this get around their abusive practices by saying, "Oh, we hired the wrong guy. We're going to punish them. It's not our company's values." It 100% is. That's why they hire these subsidiaries to do this kind of shit in the first place. And I just want to remind folks about the severity of this. One of the young people who was working at this facility turns 14 this month, and her two brothers are aged 12 and 15. They all worked at the plant earlier this year and weren't going to school, according to people familiar with their employment. I mean, this just reeks to fucking high heaven. It's unbelievable that we're sitting here talking about something like that in the year of 2022. Unfortunately, it's not unique. Now, there are different kind of carve outs that companies get to do this, but it should be notable for folks, and I didn't mention it before, that this is a family of immigrants, Guatemalan immigrants coming to this country, and that is a target of companies like Hyundai and most capitalists in this country, is to find people who are in precarious positions, find people who might not have the social networks, to protect them if they were to sort of push back against a company like this. They want people who are fearful for their status in this country. They want to be able to use forces like ICE to come and threaten people. And this, unfortunately, is not unique just to this Hyundai facility. In particular, in agriculture, there are carve-outs that allow young people to be working at those facilities. They have some rules, things like that, but they are often ignored, and those workers are absolutely abused. And it is that immigration status, it is that lack of citizenship that these companies try to use to undermine labor law, basic human dignity. So focus on this Alabama thing. Hyundai should be getting a hell of a lot more heat than it's getting right now. But also remember that child labor in the United States of America is nowhere near extinct. It is a pernicious practice, and it is oftentimes targeted at people who feel that they have the least amount of legal recourse, because the society and the elected officials in this country constantly demonize them, because we effectively have an armed Gestapo running around the country. I'm talking about ICE here, which the Supreme Court has now said can basically overturn all of your basic rights if you're within a certain distance of the U.S. border, which now includes a vast majority of the populated areas of this country, right? It's not unreasonable that people feel like they don't have recourse, because when you see the way that OSHA acts, and two, you see the failure of the government in this case to seriously come down on Hyundai and the people responsible for this, people do not feel like they will be heard if they try to bring these things to light. I'm going to play just a couple minutes from our friends at Valley Labor Report, because they've covered this story very well. I think if you're not listening to our good friends there, you should be. They put together an amazing program. But here they are talking about the Attorney General of Alabama, because this gets to a lot of different issues that I think are worth talking about right now. This has been known for a while, at least by the Attorney General's office, certainly by people working in that facility, and absolutely known by management. And they have done little to nothing so far. And I just wanted to play this a little bit right here because I think it really highlights the priorities of the Republican Party and the failure of our administrative state to make sure that things as egregious as child labor are not happening within this country. I'll jump over there right now.
Quoting from the article, Reuters learned of underage workers at the Hyundai-owned supplier following the brief disappearance in February of a Guatemalan migrant child from her family's home in Alabama. The police force in Enterprise, which is about 45 miles from the plant in Laverne, doesn't have jurisdiction to investigate possible labor law violations at the factory. Instead, the force notified the state attorney general's office after the incident. James Sanders, an Enterprise police detective, told Reuters. Mike Lewis, a spokesperson at the Alabama Attorney General's office, declined to comment. It's unclear whether the office or other investigators have contacted Smart or Hyundai about possible violations. 5 months! 5 months! They're sitting on this story for 5 months. The Attorney General's office has known about this issue for 5 months, and the only reason we know about it is because of Reuters. The only reason we know about it is because of Reuters. Let's contrast this total and complete lack of urgency, lack of moral clarity, lack of giving a damn about Hyundai exploiting children in a plant in Alabama with amputation hazards with his recent comments on Google. The Attorney General of the state of Alabama, the highest enforcer of the law in the state, unprompted, nobody asked him to do this, joined a letter with other state attorneys general who also apparently have nothing else better to do, stating that if Google does not give them the search results they want, they might sue. I mean, talk about
priorities.
I mean, good God. Talk about misplaced priorities. What about abortion? What's his urgency been like on this issue? Well, according to Parker Snyder, yet another columnist for Koch-funded, flat earth, military coup, crypto bro boosting propaganda outlet 1819 News, around 9:15 a.m. on Friday, June 24th, news of the court's decision in Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization overruling Roe v. Wade reached Alabama. At 10:37 a.m., Alabama Attorney General Steve Marshall released a statement promising that his office was immediately filing motions to dissolve any injunctions against, quote, pro-life bills held up in the court system.
Yeah, and I think the anger from Jacob and Adam there is on point. I mean, it's horrific, and they get to it later in that segment that I highly suggest people watch. I highly suggest people read the Reuters article in its full. But people knew, and it's very likely that they've been employing underage workers, more underage workers than just these 3 children who was just revealed were engaged there, right? So this is a prolonged problem that has only been brought to light because of the journalists at Reuters, despite the Attorney General of Alabama knowing about this. Now, there's a lot that we can get to, but I wanted to up the point about the Republican Party in Alabama because it mirrors the Republican Party in states like Texas and all across the South. Their failure to stand up for everyday people in their state is not only egregious, it's a part of their basic political posturing. What do I mean here? Why are all of these car companies moving to the South? Now, people who might not be following the industry closely might not know about this, but there has been a very, very large growth in the automobile industry in states like Tennessee, South Carolina, Alabama, and Texas over recent years. Why is it that they're so interested in getting Southern labor? Now, as much as I would love to, for it to be, they like the culture and the people down there. No, they know that they can go there and they can abuse people and the government won't do shit about it. because the government is very, very willing to sell out working people to international corporations and domestic corporations in this country. And that is the deal that they make with him. We're ununionized. We won't enforce labor law, and we'll turn a blind eye and slow up the system if anything egregious ever does come out. That's the game that they're playing. That's what they're selling you when you have these conservative politicians saying, look at all the jobs that are moving to our state right now. All these companies want to be in our state. They're doing that at your expense. They're doing that at your expense, at your family's expense, at your neighbor's expense, and at people who are coming through the state, immigrants who are coming through the state, who they hope they can abuse for a few years and then push them on out, either through deportation or they might just leave because they can't continue living in that area anymore. Right? That's the kind of people that these Republican politicians are bringing into your state. They're not looking out for jobs. They're not looking out for the economy. They're not trying to give you dignity at work. They're trying to protect the profits of extremely powerful corporations like Hyundai. And it should make you sick to your stomach. And the next time you hear this nonsense about pro-worker Republicans, you should laugh at their face. Not that the Democratic Party gives them much more of a shit about working people than they do, but just remember, when they're talking about economic development and bringing new jobs into your community, they're not trying to bring good jobs to your community. They're trying to take advantage of you because they think you're a chump. That's it. The people in power think that working people in the South are chumps, and they'll just accept whatever bullshit they throw at them. It's absolutely disgusting. 5 months they knew about this shit. This is the most basic kind of thing. This isn't squishy left politics kind of stuff. Should we be employing children at facilities where they can have their arms amputated by unsafe machines, where they can be crushed by a machine? This is bullshit, frankly, to be sitting here talking about right now. It fills me with fucking rage. The other point, and then I'm going to open it up to questions and comments. I'd love to hear what y'all are thinking about this or anything else on your mind. The other thing that you have to remember, and I noted it before, but it's not an accident that this is a family of immigrants, because as I said before, these companies prey on people who they think are not going to be connected enough to stand up and fight back when their rights are being so egregiously infringed, as they are in Alabama, as they are across this country right now. ICE is an arm of the capitalist state. ICE is an arm of the capitalist state. They use ICE to threaten people. Now, this is a story, and I'm going to keep people's names out of it, but just to paint a picture for folks. I'll never forget this moment because it was a good friend of mine, somebody who I love very deeply. And I won't give you all the details, but he was a member of my soccer team growing up. And something happened where an official, a referee, basically abused him during the game and hit him. Just unbelievable kind of thing to happen at a school sporting event. And when the family tried to push back and to get justice done, they took the young man, my friend, my teammate, whose family had immigrated to this country, and they asked them about their immigration status. And when they got silence back from the family, they said, "We will notify ICE if you try to pursue any case against the school district or this official." And they had to sit on it. The family had to sit on it because they were being threatened with basically having their lives uprooted and being thrown into a country again where my friend had spent very little time in, right? And there are worse things that happen out there, but that's just an example of how that immigration status is used by people in power to silence rightful grievances that people have. And it's the same kind of threat that was sort of floating over the heads of that family. Because of the lack of social support on the national level and certainly on the state level in Alabama, they were put into a very difficult situation. And I'm not going to sit here and moralize about what the family should have done or what they shouldn't have done. I'm going to recognize the structural issues that create that kind of opportunity for a corporation like Hyundai to come in there and try to profit and abuse people because of that system. That is a part of the business plan. It is not an accident. It's not some random guy, being extremely cruel just because of a fault in their soul. They're being extremely cruel and evil and wicked because they work in a system that says we are going to put profit above everything else. And these, particularly these subsidiary companies, are so nasty. They abuse people not just in Alabama, they abuse them across the country, and particularly in the auto industry. They put people into extremely dangerous situations, adults on a daily basis. And in the case of this facility in Alabama, they're putting children in that situation. So the next time you hear one of these fucking Republicans running their mouth off about how they're bringing jobs to Alabama or Tennessee or South Carolina or Texas, you point to this case and say, that's what you're bringing here. You don't care about working people in this state. And I think it's so crucial as the Republican Party is trying to, rebrand itself as a party of the cares of working people. Remind folks that what they care about is doing symbolic stuff like freaking out about Google and Disney, right? Or restricting women's basic rights in this country. They care about that so much more than about doing their basic damn job to enforce the law of the land in this country. I mean, these people make me so sick when you think about them, right? Jeff Sessions, remember him? One of those characters that we need rule of law in the United States of America, right? Where are these motherfuckers when the rule of law is being egregiously broken right there? They sat on this case for 5 months, and the only reason we're talking about it right now is not because it came out, because the Attorney General of Alabama was investigating them or doing something about it. It was because journalists got a tip, because so many people who are working the lines realized that there were 12, 13, 14-year-old immigrant children working the lines next to them. An absolute joke. Well, I'd be really happy to take some questions from y'all and comments. I'm not happy to talk about this, but I'm game to talk more about this. But whatever's on your mind, I'd also say for people who just joined up that we're going to be doing some video essays for patrons pretty soon. So if we could get, if you had any topics or things that you might want to see me sort of tackle in a video essay, form, throw that in there as well. Strom is in the chat. I was happy to see him here, friend. It says automobile part supplier plants in the South are nightmares. I think 100%. I think more needs to be done to expose that, because I mean, I think, we're in agreement on this, but it is such a big part of propaganda of a lot of these, elected officials in the Republican Party to point to these as, what they're doing for the state. They hire people and they don't give them, the same benefits as other people working at the official facilities in the area. They do things like have child labor on their fucking facilities, and they close up shop when they get in trouble and rebrand as a new name. Jacob Morrison, it's good to see you, brother. It says Alabama AG has still not commented. ADOL is investigating apparently, but that means penalties will almost certainly be civil and not criminal, which is criminal in and of itself. Unbelievable. Thank you for the chat. It's good to hear from you, brother. Let's see. I'm scrolling down, so get your questions in. The specter of Stromunism has entered the chat, and I wasn't even here to celebrate it. And Strom also says, check out the BMW plant, South Carolina, people working as temps for years. Unbelievable. And that BMW plant in South Carolina is such a joke, as you know, Strom. That's their favorite little thing to point to. And it has horrific worker rights violations as well. Yeah, I mean, subcontractors just trying to find clever ways to get away, to sort of move things around so that you can ignore basic kind of labor law. Billy Brick says, you listening to that new Blowback Grizzo? I haven't listened yet, but I definitely plan to. That's a phenomenal podcast. I'm a big fan of all of them. And I think educating Americans on the Korean War is actually extremely necessary, because I think there's still more education needed to be done about the Vietnam War. But I think people forget just how genocidal and wicked that war in Korea was. And it infuriates me when people talk about North Korea and they ignore that reality that country faced an absolutely brutal genocide from the American military, and live in memory for folks. So I'm happy that they're doing that. Strom also jumps in and says MAU is a staffing company that hires people for BMW, Bosch, and a bunch of other companies that have open manufacturing operations here. Keep that in mind, folks. And we love hearing from our friends on the Twitch chat too. They said, Marcos, the Brazilian, says this story is unacceptable, and I had a feeling it was immigrant children at sick. There's no doubt about it. And like, I was listening to the status of different members of the working class, be it through racism, sexism, immigration status, etc., is part and parcel with the system of capitalist exploitation. I think that's why it can be sort of frustrating when a lot of people miss the economic factors and the economic realities that go into these systems of like racism and like anti-immigrant hatred, is that not everybody who partakes in that is a direct beneficiary of the economic spoils that come with it. But the reason that it's allowed to percolate is because it allows certain members of the working class to be first in line. Matt Christman says, you know, the first, he said in a stream recently, I was listening to in preparation for tomorrow's interview, you know, they're the first one at the in line at the wood chipper. But it's the class as a whole. Yeah, you know, these kind of systems put certain people in the jaws first, so that maybe it can be excused for a little bit. And I think that this is why it's so important to have, you know, global international solidarity, but also doing work as much as possible with our friends, with our immigrant brothers and sisters in the labor movement, because, you know, they're the first ones on the chopping block and they're working next to you at these kind of facilities. Jules says, aren't there car plants in Mississippi? I assume. I don't know off the top of my head that, though, if I'm being completely honest. And Sean also says, where the rubber meets the road, the incentive structure in the United States is to maximize personal wealth. You'll be held in high esteem by friends and family. You'll never have to explain yourself. And also from the Twitch chat, the article said that up to 50 children may have worked in the facility. Absolutely sickening. Yeah, I mean, it's insane that this hasn't become a bigger story than it has, in my opinion. Why so dankness, sorry, said, sup chat, greetings, Mr. Griscom. Is there a gem today? I hadn't have one prepped, but I think, look for one tomorrow on the Wednesday show. Yeah, and Frank says, this isn't even a gray area issue. It's basic leftism 101. Child labor is unacceptable. I mean, it's certainly leftism 101, but I think it's like basic like labor practice 101 that everybody recognizes why those pictures of children working in facilities in the 1800s and early 1900s are absolutely unacceptable as a human level. And you shouldn't want to live in a society that is putting children you know, in positions like that. It's an absolute systematic cultural and social failure to be even talking about this right now. I appreciate these too. Little Miss Martian says, I've got no questions, just sending my best. I'm always happy folks are hanging out. Yeah, also, you know, remember, if there's anything that you'll want us to cover in these video essays that we'll be launching soon in the bonus episode, throw those in the chat too, because I'd love to hear what y'all might be interested in seeing us tackle. If you never watched my stuff on Jacobin, you know, we would do things like, you know, I did a whole thing on the self-help industry. I did something on why capital is actually the biggest threat to your private property, not socialists, and sort of got through the distinction between, you know, between personal and private property there. I did a whole thing on why theory is for everybody, why socialists shouldn't be afraid of greatness. Like, those are the kind of things I love to be able to do. So if you have any suggestions like that, I'd definitely be happy to see it. Sydney says, I'm curious what we know about transnational migrant organizing. We can't keep siloing ourselves off in our respective borders. You know, last week during the Griscom stream, I talked about the landless workers movement in Brazil and how important it was for them in building that movement successfully to start organizing and you know, creating connections across borders. And I think that's a really important point to note. what kind of direct action should be considered to push back against these horrible labor practices with the absence of organized labor at these work sites? I think the first thing that should be done is a direct targeting of the political targeting in the form of protesting and making our voice heard to the Attorney General Office of Alabama. I mean, that's like the most direct one. That's the first group that you need to start seeing some action on this from. But the long game has to be labor organizing, because that's the only force that is going to care and have the capacity and capability of really striking this kind of stuff down. Strom says, I'm going to republish my call for an exploratory convention for a Southern Socialist Party. I mean, I'm happy to, talk about that kind of stuff. Keep your eye out for Left Reckoning. I think we're going to be doing, under maybe a couple different umbrella projects, some stuff sort of at least on a media project level at first, trying to build up a stronger kind of socialist left Southern media scene, which I'm really looking forward to. But yeah, I'm always happy to talk to you, friend. Let's see. Pedro says, essential to know these news important stuff such as work conditions, exploitation, immigrants, and child labor anywhere. Really got to remember, it is still the 21st century stuff. Thanks for the insight. And that's the thing. Like, if anything, I think it's really important to remember that, like, people oftentimes look at capitalists in the 18 and 1900s as like a different kind of breed. But the only thing that's stopping these people from acting in this way was the labor movement that won so much. And right now they're trying to claw that shit back. And I think that it's worthwhile to remember that, like, yeah, this stuff is 21st century stuff, and they could bring that back if they feel like they have the power and capacity for doing it, which is why we can never sort of sit on our hands. It's absolutely crucial. And this is a good call from Sydney as well. Everyone go throw $5 at the Valley Labor Report. They're doing great work reporting on these lesser reported labor stories. I highly suggest that as well. Daniel says, and I appreciate the chat, says, one quick question and a longer one. Have you read any of Sylvia Federici's work, thoughts? It's been a little while. I haven't read anything in depth, so I don't have a spiel for you. I'm sorry on that. But two, what are your thoughts on the Communist Party in the United States, and how does it compare to DSA? I don't want to create like flame wars between groups, but because I have a lot of friends who are members of CPUSA, and I know that they do incredible, a lot of them do really great organizing work, and I'm all for, building up a strong left-wing coalition. I'll tell you, theoretically, one of the big differences that I have from CPUSA is that they, for example, they endorsed in 2016 Clinton over Bernie, because they have a position, which is that to further the class war, the Republican Party needs to be defeated, and the Democratic Party basically needs to become the dominant party in the country, and then the Socialist Communist movement can take them on directly and have that fight. And that's an analysis that I very much disagree with. Which I think a lot of people aren't as familiar with. And I would imagine, I think they probably had a decent growth in membership. I don't think anything close to DSA since 2016. So maybe some people are pushing back against that analysis within the organization. But that's why I've never felt that that's like a viable place to direct people to right now. But that's just my 2 cents on it. And Sir Lava says, and appreciate the chat too, says, if nobody gets charged criminally for child labor, we can never stop bringing that up. Yeah, and I think even if they do get charged, we can never stop bringing that up. I think it's truly a joke that we're having this conversation right now, friends. Yeah, this is a disgusting reminder too from Jules. Says, during the corona virus pandemic, when we were all in lockdown, remember people in the meatpacking industry managers were placing bets on who would die next or lose a limb. Unbelievable, that shit. And I actually don't remember off the top of my head if there was ever anything more serious than maybe firing of those individual folks for their callousness and like absolutely inhuman actions in that moment. That shit was absolutely disgusting. Like the meatpacking industry is also one of those industries that is also highly represented in the South and is extremely brutal. I mean, people wearing diapers, people working, keeping the lines on when somebody's hand gets chopped off, stuff like that. Just unbelievable, inhumane conditions. And it just shows that like we need a much, much more robust system in this country to enforce the laws that are on the books. And I wanted to be clear about this too, talking about OSHA, talking about the Department of Labor, talking about these things that like there are like, don't take me saying that OSHA is not doing enough as saying that like if you meet somebody or know somebody, or maybe if you do work in those industries, that like everybody in there doesn't have their heart in the right place, is not trying to fight for people, because a lot of people go into those institutions with the intention of protecting folks from this kind of bullshit. But the fact is that those institutions are underfunded, and the people at the top basically make deals to look the other way to protect the interests of capital. I highly suggest, and I do it almost every stream now, that people read the work of Leo Panich and Sam Ginden, in addition to a lot of the other kinds of, bedrock socialist texts, because their addition and their contribution to what's called state theory, I think, is a very important thing for socialists to understand. Is that like Lenin has a line, I was just going to sort of paraphrase it, that like the the government, the state, is just the executive committee of the bourgeoisie, right? And like the image that most people get from that is that the government is basically just taking direct calls and doing what they're sort of ordered to by capital. And that certainly happens, but that's not it. And if you don't sort of expand your understanding of what the state does, you're going to have a hard time sort of figuring out ways to push back against it and fight it, and then maybe potentially win it. It's not necessarily the executive committee of the bourgeoisie, but it does have an interest in maintaining capital and capitalist hegemony. And the difference between the kind of Leninist model, or maybe the way that that's popularly understood, rather than attributing that all to Lenin, is that the state looks out for capitalists in the long term. So sometimes the state will do things that are against the interests of the capitalist class in an initial sense, but always with the goal of maintaining their power, and preventing any kind of workers revolution, workers movement to really seize control of these things. So the state, for example, is very willing from time to time to make an example of a capitalist corporation that steps out of line, but with the intention of securing the legitimacy of wage theft, of profit above all else, and wage slavery in this country, right? Like that's the long-term goal of the capitalist class. I'm sorry, of the state, and you'll see it, like for example, Federal Reserve policy, where they're like, okay, well, some capitalists are going to lose from this. We talked about that last week during the show, with how fintech, financial technology, is being hit really hard by the end of cheap money. So if you were to say like, oh, well, the state is just the executive committee of the bourgeoisie, of the capitalist class, you'd have a little bit of a puzzle there to work through. And the point is like, well, those are the ones that we can sort of push out. And it might be for the investors, for the actual people behind those institutions, in their long-term interest, to sort of trim some of the fat. Because we're going to create a recession, and we're going to make it harder for workers to organize. We're going to make life harder for working people so that we can exploit them in our preferred manner. And that will be to benefit. So you might kick and scream in the first round of it, but this is for the benefit of the capitalist class as a whole. And I think understanding that role of the state is really important for being able to build movements there. And on the Panich Ginden, this is a good suggestions, actually, Mo. I like this a lot. I would love to see a video on the Syriza party in Greece, how it failed, lessons learned, etc. I'm going to write that down right now, frankly. I think that's a good idea, because I bring that up a lot, and it'd be great to have a video to direct people to. Jacob says, I'd be interested in some more history on the failed Labor Party from the 90s. There was a recent Jackman piece that I want to dig into, but I'm sure that there is more that could be said. I think that's a great idea too. Obviously, Adolf Reed's the person really to talk to about that, but I think that'd be a really good call as well. Our friend Brian notes in, he says, the Frito-Lay in Topeka near me had workers working 70 hours a week during the pandemic, decent money, but they wring you dry. When Republicans talk about jobs, that's the best case scenario. Exactly. And it's just like, this is the point that has to be made. Is this? It's not that these guys are looking out for worker. I mean, for workers, right? One, the most egregious example that we know, or the most frequent example that we cite, is the amount of money that we give to these corporations. But also remember that when they're coming to red states, they're coming here because they think that they can get away with a little bit more, and it's pretty horrific. Um, Jordan says, I was born in Florida. Does that qualify me for something? Does Southern California count in some way? And I think we're talking about this project with Strom. I mean, all friends are welcome. And I think Florida counts. We're actually going to have Nando on, I think, soon to do. I don't know if folks remember, but some of these videos, we've had folks from different states come to sort of give us a breakdown of like the political economy and the history. We've done South Carolina, we've done Colorado, we've done a couple others as well. And I think we might get Nando on, if anything, to sort of focus on South Florida, Miami. But I'd love to do more stuff on Florida because I find it to be a really fascinating state, because it does sort of sit the fence between the South and something else. Yeah, all comrades welcome in building a Southern socialist movement for real. Lenny says, I grew up in Bakersfield, California. Does that count as being from the South? I mean, you want to get me, a couple beers and we can debate these kind of things. But Bakersfield, I mean, Bakersfield Sound, a lot of people from Oklahoma came out there. I mean, there's certainly a direct connection, if it's not geographically there. The people went there. So I think there's a fair argument to be made. I'm just going to put this up to say no to this. Bruce says Florida and Texas ain't the South. That's incorrect. We can debate that again in the future. Um, well, I appreciate the chat from MAK really very much. I know you sent a kind of GIF thing, but it reads it as text. Thank you so much, friend, for the chat. That really helps us keep things going. And also, when we're talking about stuff like that next week, hopefully, we're going to be getting all of the merch out. I'm looking forward to getting that. It was a pain in the ass getting everything set up, but hopefully, very very soon. But appreciate the chat so much, MAK. Here we go. Strom being a pan Southerner says, do not forget that Ronnie Van Zant was from Jacksonville and that Dickie Betts is from Sarasota. I mean, I think there's a decent argument to make about most of Florida being Southern, if not the entire state. Anastasia, I think getting rid of the GOP in order for other movements to make themselves apparent in opposition to one establishment party would be helpful, but this would never happen via backing the establishment. I mean, one of the arguments I always make, it's a little bit tongue in cheek about left-wing socialist movements in the South, is that, like, in New York, you have to have this direct confrontation with the Democratic Party, and like, there's obviously some viability there, but I think people sometimes have a hard time sort of telling the difference between socialist politics and Democratic Party politics, even though I think the distinction there is pretty clear as day. I've always argued that like the socialist movement in the South in particular can't be to try to revivify the carcass of the Democratic Party. It's an advantage in a way, actually, I think. Not in the immediate sense, because we're seeing what Republican governments are doing to working people. But if you don't have like a strong institution, organization that you have to beat first, I think that puts us in a pretty strong position. And I'm not saying that from like an accelerationist standpoint. I'm saying that from like, look at the current state of politics in Alabama and Texas and South Carolina. I think that why not at that point just sort of try to build up a direct movement to confront the power of the GOP there, because it's not like the Democrats look like they're very close to winning, any sort of a majority there. Let's see. What specific Leo Panch works do you recommend? I mean, I think that the one of the best texts is fuck, the title was something like Corbin, Sanders, and Syriza. It's the Socialist something today. Let me get it real quick. I'm sorry, it's not on the top of my head. That's a book that I think is a really great introduction. It's sort of recent in its subject matter. So, like a lot of the examples, be the social challenge today, Syriza, Corbin, and Sanders. I think is a great starting point to sort of like get into those arguments. Um, it's slightly dated because what year did it come out? It came out, I think it came out certainly before the Sanders, the second Sanders run. But it's looking at those kind of movements. So, Corbyn and Sanders were looking at least somewhat viable at that point. It came out in, I guess the expanded edition came out April 2020. So pick that up. It's a short read. It's very accessible, and I think it's a great way to start thinking about these things. But like for me, like I spent my time reading a lot of Marx and Lenin, and then like Gramsci and things like that. But Panich, I think, and Gendon are a really great way to sort of introduce yourself into like a modern democratic socialist politics. They sort of work through pushing back against Palancis and building off of a lot of the work of Ralph Miliband, who were some like in like the 70s and 80s, a lot of Marxists started to make a turn into what's called state theory, which is the argument that the Marxist theory of the state wasn't strong enough, which I think is a fair criticism. And I think Marx even would agree with it. Capital was supposed to be his work on the economy. And then he was also supposed to work on a capital style book, like another really deep study of the state that he never got around to doing. So I think that picking up that work by people in the 70s and 80s was really influential. And I think Ginden and Panich are really great introductions and modern views that sort of work through some of the puzzles that were there in the 70s as well. So the Social Challenge today, I think, is a really great Leo Panich book to start with if you need one. We've done stuff on it too on Left Reckoning, I believe, if not on TMBS. On Left Reckoning, so you can maybe look that up. Griscom, Black, Leo Panich. I'm sure you'll find some stuff, if nothing else. This is a great suggestion too. Trevor says a video reading series on Prisoners of the American Dream would be a great, just finished rereading. Incredible book, but very dense. That's a phenomenal book. That's a book that I highly suggest that everybody reads. It's by Mike Davis, one of the great American Marxist theorists and activists. And, I was talking to Matt the other day, and he was saying one thing that's so great about Davis is that, he spent a lot of his life, obviously he was very influential in the activist scene, but he was also an academic. And like, there's a certain segment of the left that gets very like worked up about, academics, not sort of having praxis or anything like that. And Mike Davis never gets those kind of criticisms, which is, I think, a badge of honor to how serious and wonderful of a radical and revolutionary he is. Just answering this question from Rue, isn't Texas also a former Mexican state? That's true. Texas had had 6 nations rule over it, so it's certainly a unique state in the South. But I mean, I think Texas has its own like unique culture, but I also think that it's incorrect to not recognize that it has a history that was very much punctuated by the history of the southern states, and that's why I consider it to be a part of the South. But we can argue about that kind of stuff some other time. I'd like to have someone else on the other side than just me chatting one way. I don't know if this is an older question, but merch is coming out next week. I just had to get stuff set up. But we'll be hopefully releasing it like next week, either Monday or Tuesday. So keep your eye out for that. Let's see. The turkey says I'm from Brisbane. It's like the Florida of Australia, kind of. I have a lot of friends from Brisbane. I've always wanted to go out there someday. I love our Australian contingent of Left Reckoning. That's, as international, always makes me a little happy. Okay. I think I'm a little behind y'all, but David, can you say Jezza, Jezza, Jezza? Would mean a lot to me as a Brit, happily. Thomas Brock also notes that Crispin has been doing a reading on Panich and Gindin, named on their book, The Making of Global Capitalism, which is another phenomenal book. It's a book that y'all join me in this quest to make Verso re-release that book. It's very hard to get an actual printed copy of that book right now. But yeah, I do highly suggest that book. And also I think that Crispin's streams on that have been excellent. He'll be on the show tomorrow. I'm looking forward to chatting with him. MDR has a good plug for joining up to LR Patreon. I think this is on the Socialist Challenge today. He said it's a very quick read. If you join the Left Reckoning Patreon, I can give you an audio form I made of it. So there's a little enticement there, y'all. Just PM MDR in the Left Reckoning Discord. Dakota says, speaking of Panich, I stumbled on a World Socialist website article denouncing Panich and Giddens' analysis of Syriza, and phew, that piece was a doozy. It doesn't surprise me given the stuff that those guys published. I mean, I will say, as weird and as much as I disagree with the World Socialist website, I do give them credit. They put out a lot of stuff. There's also a really good, if people are trying to do dives into Leo Panich, there's great interviews and debates on YouTube too, as Jeffrey Canay says, and also Adam Proctor, our friend and host of the Dead Pundit Society. I know he's taken a bit of a hiatus, but I believe all that stuff is still on all the different podcast websites. He did an interview with Sam Gindin, I think about 2 years ago or something like that. Maybe my dates are all fucked up these days, frankly, but a little bit of an older interview with Sam Gindin that I think is very worth listening to as well, if you want to get around to it. Davis is sick, isn't he? Yeah, he is. He's decided that he is going to he's going to stop taking cancer treatments. So there's a really wonderful interview in the LA Times with Sam Dean that just came out that I highly suggest people read. It's filled with incredible nuggets and advice from Mike Davis. And I'm sad that he's on his way out, but I'm happy he was able to choose his own path out of there. He's a huge inspiration on, saying he's a huge inspiration on me is just almost, too basic. He's a huge inspiration, and for so many on the American left and across the world, one of the best American Marxists ever, and very grateful for his work. And I wish him the best and peace. But yeah, no, he's not doing very well right now, unfortunately. Marcos, the Brazilian, says, any thoughts on Glenn Greenwald's husband, David Miranda, on leaving PSOL and supporting Ciro Gomez? I mean, it's shameful is all that it is. I mean, watching everything that's been going on with Glenn, and also seeing the way David Miranda has been acting, I think it's shameful. We'll do some stuff mainly focused on substance about the Brazilian election soon. I haven't reached out to him yet, but I plan to soon, getting Brian Meir back on the program, and I'm sure we'll talk about that. Yeah, it's a very bizarre, frankly. Chapter for both of them. Tripod, what did I say about New Jersey? No love for New Jersey, Mr. Griscom. Do you know of any books that covered the Bayonne refinery strike of 1915? No. But I'd be happy for any suggestions that folks have. Matt Christman will be on the main show tomorrow, which premieres Wednesdays. It's the last Wednesday show. So for folks who just joined us, we're reshuffling things a little bit. Matt and I are going back to Tuesday nights at TMBS time, Tuesday nights at 7 Central. So I guess a little bit later than 1 hour later than the traditional TMBS time. We're moving Tuesday nights at 7 Central. But so tomorrow is going to be the last Wednesday show, but Wednesday at 7 Central, we're going to have Matt Christman on the main show. I'm really looking forward to chat with him. We're going to be talking about Sleepy Joe. We're going to be talking about the post-Bernie moment. We're going to be talking a little bit about the podcast that he's been doing that's very excellent called Hell of Presidents. It's going to be a lot of fun. So be sure to tune at 7 Central tomorrow. And I think that might be a decent point to jump off. I appreciate everybody for stopping by. Merch will be coming out next week, hopefully Monday or Tuesday. We have a site, leftreckoning.com, that'll be on. I will be sharing links and stuff once everything is launched and ready to go. You'll be able to get this hat. We have a really cool On the Road shirt, and we have a big Tex on Fire tank top that Matt's been rocking on Majority Report from time to time. So hope you all check that out. Tomorrow, Wednesday, 7 Central, we're going to have Matt Christman on. This weekend, we'll have a shorter video essay from me, and a lot of really exciting stuff coming up. If not in August, the next couple months, Matt and I are going to expand the project pretty significantly with a little bit of a focus on American history, which I'm looking forward to sharing some of that stuff with y'all, but I won't announce much more than that until we get everything sort of sorted there. But one thing I can announce is we'll be doing cross streams with our friends at This Is Revolution. We're doing a news show with them, I think Thursdays. I think the first one will be August 11th, but we're still setting dates up for that. Y'all be able to find it once we get everything set up. But that'll be a monthly offering that we'll be doing between both of those podcasts. So looking forward to chilling out with all those folks. And as always, everybody, take care, stay safe. Feel free to reach out if you have anything you want to talk about. Appreciate you all. And, for patrons, might as well do this. Remember, it's coming up at the end of the month. It's always helpful for us if you can check your cards because a lot of times those get declined or information is wrong. So always appreciate when y'all can do that. But anyways, till tomorrow, take care.